The presence of someone who cannot be moved by guilt or seduction threatens every system built on emotional control. Eyes begin to study such a person with suspicion, not because of harm caused, but because of the silence, the refusal to join the dance of dependency. Words don't flow to please. Smiles aren't exchanged as currency. There is no hunger for attention, no thirst for belonging. That alone is enough to draw hostility. Watch how the crowd reacts to stillness. In a room full of performers, the one who sits quietly becomes a mystery, and people hate what they can't predict. The unpredictable mind is always dangerous, not because it harms others, but because it doesn't move when pushed. There is no hook to reel it in, no fear to exploit. A mind like this plays by its own logic, often invisible to those who are ruled by collective noise. This is why people gather in circles and call it unity, when often it's fear in disguise. They need agreement to feel correct. They need witnesses to their choices. Without it, they begin to question their worth. But the individual who walks outside the circle, not in protest but in peace, is accused of betrayal, not because they've done harm, but because they reveal how shallow the foundation of the group truly is. A person like this doesn't broadcast superiority. That's the illusion others paint onto them. The truth is simpler. Nothing external is required to feel full, and that fullness without transaction is what threatens the machine of society. Systems, whether political, economic, religious, or social, depend on the assumption that everyone needs something from them. Strip that assumption, and the entire structure shudders. Consider how many interactions are based not on truth, but on need. Friendships clung to out of loneliness. Love begged for out of emptiness. Alliances formed out of fear. These are not sacred bonds. They are survival strategies. But the one who has killed the hunger no longer plays that game. This person connects, but not out of lack. Gives, but not to be loved. Walks away not out of pride, but peace. And the powerful recognize this, not with respect, but fear. A society where more people embody that energy cannot be ruled by shame or reward. The usual tools, titles, social exclusion, emotional manipulation, become useless. Those in power would rather have angry citizens than self-reliant ones. Anger can be redirected. Independence cannot. There is a reason entire cultures are designed to glorify conformity. From the earliest days, obedience is framed as virtue. Agreement is praised. Silence is enforced. And those who ask why are treated as threats, not thinkers. What's truly feared is not rebellion, but self-sufficiency. Because the self-sufficient don't revolt, they vanish. They don't fight the system, they outgrow it. And what cannot be controlled, cannot be predicted. What cannot be predicted must be silenced. In ancient courts, the sovereign always feared the man who sought nothing. A servant who wants to rise can be bribed. An advisor who wants fame can be used. But the one who does his duty and walks away, seeking no reward, that man becomes a shadow. Dangerous, incorruptible. These are the ones whispered about, not celebrated. Their names don't fill books, but their presence shifts empires. So how does one reach such a place? Not by pretending to be invincible, but by stripping away illusions. Start by losing the need to be understood. That need is a cage. Then walk away from praise. That is another leash. Observe how much of daily life is dictated by fear of disconnection. Then detach, not from love but from dependence. This doesn't mean isolation. It means sovereignty. There is a difference between solitude and exile. One is chosen, the other is feared. Those who master the former never suffer the latter. When interaction becomes a choice, not a survival tactic, the quality of life sharpens. No conversation is forced. No alliance is fake. No face is worn just to blend in. To reach this level requires pain. The pain of detachment, the agony of silence, the weight of standing alone when the world seduces with comfort. But once endured, it becomes the sharpest sword. Not for killing others, but for cutting through delusion. And with clarity comes a power that does not need to roar. It simply exists. In every generation, there are a few who escape the net. They don't ask for permission. They don't chase applause. They live, speak, and die on their own terms. And though history may forget their names, power never does. It remembers the ones it could never tame. The rulers of thought, of faith, Of law, understand this truth. A man who doesn't need them cannot be led by them. So they use softer weapons. They disguise control as love, frame submission as cooperation, label obedience as virtue. They speak of community, harmony, belonging, not as ideals, but as tools, and it works for most, but not all. Because somewhere, a few remain untamed. The ones who don't flinch under silence, who don't crack under pressure, who don't shrink when left alone. They become the measure, not of morality, but of will, and the system watches them like a fire watches rain, hoping quietly it doesn't spread. The world is not afraid of violence. It is built to absorb violence. It can profit from it, report on it, sensationalize it, legislate it, but it is paralyzed by silence, by that calm refusal to be baited, pulled, or provoked. That's what makes a free man dangerous. He doesn't react the way the system expects. He doesn't rage, he doesn't beg, he doesn't ask for justice. He simply turns his back, and in that quiet movement, everything built on obedience begins to decay. A crowd cannot comprehend the one who walks alone. It doesn't make sense to those who have never tasted self-reliance. They will project, calling it bitterness, trauma, ego, or madness, because what they can't control, they must label. It comforts them. But the truth is colder than their words. Not everyone is born to follow. Some souls are simply untouchable by noise. They learn to lead not by command, but by contrast. This contrast causes unrest. It reveals just how much others rely on each other for identity. Most are not individuals. They are reflections of those around them. Strip them of community, and they become hollow. Their values, their dreams, their fears borrowed. Without someone to echo them, they dissolve, but not everyone. Some figure out who they are in silence, and once that self is discovered without witnesses, it cannot be altered. Control is easy when people fear exclusion. That fear is older than politics, deeper than law. It lives in the bones. Tribes survived because members stayed together. So the modern world exploits that instinct, shaming those who diverge. But survival has changed. Obedience is no longer strength. The truly evolved do not seek safety in numbers. They seek power in solitude, not to escape others, but to stop depending on them for purpose. That is what makes the untethered individual impossible to dominate, because there is nothing you can threaten to take away. The approval of others, already irrelevant. Status, meaningless, even love. Appreciated but not begged for. This person walks alone, not out of despair, but design. Every step forward is a choice, not a cry for help, but a demonstration of sovereignty. This brand of independence is not about rejecting others. It's about rejecting dependency. It's not hatred, it's clarity. Others are welcome, but not required. Love is accepted, but not craved. Friendship is honored, but not needed. And in this calm detachment lies the one thing most empires fear: a person who cannot be recruited. Every tyrant, every manipulator, every marketer wants the same thing: attention. The need for attention is what makes the masses predictable. Those who don't seek it cannot be lured. They don't respond to flattery. They're indifferent to insult. Their silence is not weakness, it's a shield. It protects their focus, because where attention goes, control follows. This is why modern life is engineered to reward exposure. The more visible someone is, the easier they are to shape. Their self-worth becomes attached to metrics. Reactions, applause. The invisible man, however, is beyond reach. He builds in the shadows, improves without documenting, wins without posting. And by the time the world notices, it's already too late to stop him. He has already become what the system cannot replicate: sovereign. But such a path comes at a price. Detachment is not gifted, it is earned. There are nights when silence is loud, when loneliness claws at the mind, when the temptation to rejoin the herd feels almost irresistible. These are the trials of the free. To survive them is to burn away all illusion. To emerge from them is to carry a power that no one gave, and no one can take. Most men are not ready for that. They would rather suffer together than grow alone. They would rather be miserable in company than fulfilled in solitude, because solitude demands accountability. There is no one else to blame, no one to lean on, just a mirror. And what that mirror reflects is often too brutal for the average man. but not for the one who seeks truth more than comfort. Truth is what this path leads to, and truth by its nature is divisive. It separates the strong from the fragile. It shatters illusions. It doesn't care about feelings. And that's why the independent are feared, not because they are cruel, but because they are honest, and honesty, in a world built on mutual lies, is unforgivable. Watch how people react when someone refuses to play emotional games. The silence drives them mad. They provoke, hoping to be noticed. But when indifference meets their performance, they unravel, because they've never been taught how to exist without attention, without validation, without someone mirroring them. That's how weak society has become. This weakness is profitable. It fuels industries, sells products, elects leaders, funds religions. It keeps the masses docile, needing, wanting, never whole. That's why strength is suppressed. True strength is a form of rebellion, not the strength to lift weights, but to walk away, not the strength to dominate others, but to master oneself. That strength, once unleashed, spreads silently, and the system knows it. So it works overtime to keep men dependent. It offers distractions in place of direction, entertainment in place of purpose, groupthink in place of identity. And as long as most follow, nothing changes. But the presence of even one who opts out, that is enough to disturb the whole. Because the independent man doesn't preach, he doesn't argue, he doesn't recruit, he just exists. And existence alone becomes a threat. Because if he can live on his own terms, why can't others? This question begins to eat away at the minds of the watchers. And soon the system must respond, not with force but with narrative. They will say he is antisocial, that he lacks empathy, that he's dangerous. These are just masks for the same truth. They cannot control him. The war is not fought with weapons. It is fought with perception. And those who don't play the game become targets, not because of violence, but because of influence. Because nothing is more influential than a man who needs nothing. They gather to analyze him, experts with no understanding, scholars with no experience, authorities with no control. They ask what drives someone to such isolation, but they look for wounds when they should be looking for strength. They assume damage when they should suspect design, because only those who have never stood alone mistake silence for pain. Those in power do not fear numbers. They fear ideas. Ideas are silent assassins. They take root without permission and grow in darkness. And among the most dangerous ideas is this one, that you do not need anyone to be complete. That idea spreads like a virus, not loudly, not with banners, but quietly from one sharp mind to another. It travels through observation, through presence, through the unmistakable aura of someone who stands without support. Even without speaking, this person teaches, not in words but in example. Every calm reaction, every refusal to chase, every decision made without consulting the crowd, that is a lesson. It challenges the assumptions people have built their lives upon. And when those assumptions crack, the entire structure of dependence begins to shake. Because dependence at its core is about fear, fear of dying alone, fear of being ignored, fear of facing the void without applause, company, or reassurance. And so the average person clings to others, to beliefs, to routines, to anything that makes the silence go away. But some let the silence speak. And in that silence, they meet the part of themselves that never needed saving. Most will never reach that point. They will call it loneliness. They will try to fix it with noise. But those who stay, those who endure the suffocation of stillness, will eventually find something no one else can give: unshakable clarity. That clarity is power, not the kind that bends others, but the kind that never bends even under pressure. In a world trained to perform, to impress, to be seen, the refusal to participate becomes revolutionary. When you live in a system where everyone is selling themselves, not being for sale is war. When identity is a brand, not marketing, it is rebellion. When every opinion is broadcast, keeping yours to yourself is a threat. So the system retaliates, not by locking doors, but by flooding them open with distraction. They don't isolate the free, they drown them in noise. They don't silence them, they tempt them with shallow platforms and false rewards. They don't confront them, they laugh at them, hoping others will do the same. But the free do not respond. They vanish into depth. They become invisible to the machine. And yet, that invisibility becomes a spotlight. Others start noticing what isn't said, what isn't shared, what isn't begged for. They see someone walk without hurry, speak without agenda, act without needing to be seen. And for a moment, they wonder what it would feel like to live like that. That wonder is the beginning of collapse, for systems built on emotional dependency cannot survive the existence of emotional freedom. Indifference is feared more than hatred. Hatred can be shaped, used, repackaged, but indifference starves the system. When applause is not wanted, rejection has no power. When love is not chased, loss has no sting. When judgment has no influence, shame becomes irrelevant. This is where true liberation begins. Imagine a world where more individuals lived like this, not selfishly, but sovereignly, not hateful, just whole. What would remain of the structures built to keep people small? What use would there be for advertisements if no one needed to be told what they lack? What power would governments have if people feared no punishment? What weight would society's opinions carry if individuals defined their own worth? The system doesn't fear chaos. It fears clarity. Chaos can be organized, absorbed, redirected, but clarity, that slices through illusion like a blade. And there's nothing more clarifying than realizing you can survive without being liked, needed, or understood. That's the beginning of a new kind of order, one that can't be bought or broken. So few reach this state because the path is brutal. It asks for sacrifices the world cannot comprehend. Reputation, comfort, relationships, even identity must be burned. The ego, which wants to be loved and admired, must be silenced. The heart, which aches for connection, must be tested, and the mind, which craves validation, must be shattered and rebuilt. But those who endure this trial become legends, not in the history books, but in the memory of those who watched and never forgot, not because of speeches or movements, but because of the quiet way they walked through the world. Unowned, their lives become myths, not because they changed the world, but because they refused to let the world change them. Their strength doesn't come from domination, but from detachment. They don't fight for attention. They don't resist the world, they transcend it. They choose their own rhythm, move by their own logic, live by their own law, not to defy others but to obey something deeper, truth. And that allegiance to something untouchable is what makes them untouchable. What the world calls madness is often just independence misunderstood. What it calls cold is often just focused. What it calls arrogant is often just unconcerned with being seen. So many terms are used to pull the free back into the fold, but the truly free are immune to language. They speak in silence, they lead by example, they act without asking. And this presence, this unbending posture, becomes magnetic, not loud, not popular, but undeniable. In time, others begin to imitate, first awkwardly, then naturally. They stop chasing, stop pleasing, stop explaining. They begin to walk slower, think clearer, detach more. And the system watches in panic, because if too many become immune, the game is over. Empires fall when belief collapses. No army can hold a kingdom where the people no longer believe. And belief dies the moment someone proves it was never needed to begin with. That's what the self-sufficient man does. He proves the world wrong without saying a word. He makes the cage look optional. He doesn't ask for change, he becomes it. And that is the purest threat there is. So what does society do with such people? It erases them, forgets them, pretends they never mattered. But they always do. Because power is not measured by how many listen, but by how many live differently after you've gone. The one who needs no one is not cruel, not hateful, not broken. He is complete. And nothing terrifies the world more than a man who is complete without them. He cannot be ruled. He cannot be used. He cannot be owned. And that is why he is feared.